Thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the introduction. It is such an honor to be here and to join your chapter at this time where you reflect on your next plans. But let me start tonight's conversation with a lady called Funke Opeke. In 2005, she returned to Nigeria after 20 years of building a career in American telecoms, and she had seen that the internet was transformational. It accelerated commerce, it compressed distance, created entirely new categories of economic life. And when she came back home, she actually saw something different. She looked around, and what she saw around her was long accepted as just the way things were. There was actually almost no internet. This was 2005. But Funke Obeke did not just see a gap. She saw a cable, a literal missing cable. She conceived a project everyone called impossible, a 7,000-kilometer undersea cable from Portugal to West Africa. She raised 240 million US dollars, and she navigated regulators and infrastructure contracts across multiple countries and finally got to the point where in 2010, Main One was launched. Now, it was transformational because wholesale bandwidth prices dropped by over 50% almost immediately. Internet penetration grew from under 10% to approximately 40% in Nigeria. This became the foundation on which Paystack, Flutterwave, and an entire generation of African fintech was constructed on the back of Main One. So Funke Opeke built the precondition for an entire digital economy. And she saw it because she understood the gap between how a system claimed to work versus how it actually worked. That is the outside eye. In 2007, Kenya was in crisis. Post-election violence had broken out. People needed to know where it was safe in real time. Ori Okola was a lawyer and a blogger, not a software engineer, not as clever as the women in this room in terms of technical ability, but she did understand the information gap precisely that she saw because she was living inside it. She co-created Ushandi, which is Swahili for witness, or Shahidi, sorry, which is Swahili for witness. And it is essentially crowdsourcing real-time reports via SMS and mapped using Google. It was built in a matter of days and cost almost nothing. And it worked. Election monitors in Sudan, disaster responders in Haiti, crisis coordinators in Fukushima, the Red Cross, the BBC, all used Ushahidi, which is now in over 160 countries. It was not built by a Silicon Valley team, imagining what a crisis might look like. It was built by someone who was actually in the crisis themselves, who understood that the system's failure from the inside of that system itself. This, again, is the outside eye, the ability to formulate a view of a system and the change it requires. There's a pattern here. Both women saw what they saw because of where they stood, not despite it. Because as African women in technology, we have navigated systems designed around assumptions that did not include us. We have learned out of necessity to ask questions that people inside those systems actually never think to ask. Who does the system actually serve? Where is the real gap? And not an assumed gap. What does it look like to operate from the edge of a particular system and not just the center? These are not soft questions. And in the age of AI, They are actually the most strategically important questions that exist. I want to tell you how I came to understand the outside eye, not as a concept, but as a career. I qualified as a chartered accountant, so much like Ori, I am from outside the industry, but from inside. Um, so I qualified as a CA because I wanted to understand how systems move. I was passionate to understand how capital flows and how a number on a board paper becomes a life changed or a life constrained. My first real lesson came at Old Mutual's Masizizane Fund. I was stewarding an investment portfolio of about R500 million, and this was capital directed specifically at women, youth, and people with disabilities. These were people that would ordinarily be priced out of the financial system and people whose cash flows were actually not easy to model. The capital existed, the credit worthiness existed, the businesses existed. What was missing at the time was a framework that could see them specifically. The models had been built around a borrower profile that excluded most of Africa's actual entrepreneurs, not by intent, but by assumption that African entrepreneurs are just like. So we rebuilt that lens and loan book performance improved by 20%. That was not a financial insight or strategy or some clever financial engineering. It actually was a systems insight. And it only came from standing so close to the gap to see it clearly. That question, where is the system failing to see what is actually there, actually became not just a recipe for success in my early career, but it became the weaving line of every role I played or I took after that. At Telkom, a telecoms company that you probably know of, I ran Future Makers, and Future Makers was an enterprise development program that most people would have treated like a compliance tool or compliance obligation. I chose to use the outside eye and I treated it as a market development strategy. We scaled the investment portfolio of technology companies by over 3 times. Revenue grew from 300 million rand to about 1.5 billion rand. Compliance thinking says do the minimum, but systems thinking says what is this actually capable of? This holds across all the various organizations I've been a part of and holds even more now that I'm at Truecaller, where our mission is to make sure that tomorrow's communication is safe, trusted, and efficient. When a woman entrepreneur in Johannesburg trusts her digital space, she picks up the call, she takes the meeting, she builds. Trust in the sense in digital communications determines participation. And because she's participated, she's able to build her future. In every boardroom, every investment committee, every global forum that I've sat in, the most valuable thing I brought was not my CA designation or any other qualifications. It was the ability to see what the room could not see, what technology could transform beyond the technology itself. What does this have to do with innovating in an era of AI, you might ask? Well, here's what I want you to understand about this moment. Every major organization in the world is currently doing the same thing, adopting AI to automate tasks, cut costs, and accelerate workflows. The tools are broadly and ubiquitously available. The playbook is identical. And here's the problem with that. When every company uses the same AI tools to automate the same processes, the efficiency gains do not create competitive advantage. They create a new baseline. In other words, you are fast or faster, and so your competitor is also faster. You're cheaper, so your competitor is also cheaper. Everyone is at the same elevated speed with higher costs, higher expectations, and thinner margins. This is the AI leverage paradox, also called the AI efficiency trap. AI increases productivity, But productivity, uniformly distributed, erodes the very competitiveness it was supposed to create. The infrastructure providers actually are the ones capturing the value. The organizations using the tools are left racing a treadmill that keeps accelerating. There's actually one way out of this trap, and it is not more efficiency. It is differentiation. It is innovation. It is the topic of today's talk. It is the capacity to see what is not yet visible and build toward it before the market knows that it needs it. That requires, above all else, the outside eye. That's what Funke saw. That's what Ori saw. That's what I've seen in my own career. Now, I want to say something that might actually surprise you because we're all excited about AI and it is topical across many, many platforms. But the principles of innovation actually have not changed in the AI era, not one single bit. The fundamental question at the center of all innovation is exactly the same question it has always been. Whose problem are you actually solving? And do you understand it from their perspective or only from yours? I know this because I lived it at the center of one of Africa's greatest innovation stories. Let's talk about M-Pesa. Before it launched, something remarkable was already happening in Kenya. Urban workers were sending money home to rural families, and they had invented their own solution. They were buying airtime and sending the codes to relatives who then could use it for calls or sell it for cash. No app, no startup, no venture capital, just people solving their own problem with the tools that they had. The genius of M-Pesa was not actually the technology, if you think about it. By then, SMS technology was fairly straightforward. The genius was going back to the problem, looking at what people were already doing and asking, what is the job that they're actually trying to get done? And then proceeding to build a formal infrastructure around that informal reality that already existed. At launch, M-Pesa was marketed simply as send money home. Within a year, 2 million customers. Today, more than half of Kenya's GDP flows through M-Pesa. When I was at Vodacom, I had the privilege of leading the strategy for M-Pesa's evolution across multiple African markets with all their different customer realities and local nuances and economic conditions. And what I learned in every single market, and this is across 8 markets on the African continent, was the same thing that the original team learned in 2005. Going back to the customer's actual reality, their actual Tuesday, their actual constraint, how they're solving their current problem, is the best strategy for innovation and growth. The technology is not the innovation. Understanding the human is the innovation. The technology is just how you deliver it at scale. I've seen this hold across every single business I have invested in or helped scale. The ones that worked where the ones that actually were not that interested in understanding their customers. They had the most sophisticated technology, but not that interested in understanding their customers. The ones that were actually clear and interested in understanding their customers and understanding and being passionate about the problem that they were solving were the ones that scaled. This is the work I do 90% of my time at Truecaller. We spend a lot of time trying to understand our customers. What does spam actually make them feel? How does it make them feel when they don't get spam? And a lot of the times I get messages like, spam actually really abuses me. And when I don't get spam, I feel protected. I feel that there's a barrier between me and the big bad world. And these are the consequences of understanding your customer in the context of innovation. The businesses that fail confuse product sophistication for customer proximity. They mistake the map for the territory. AI, contrary to popular belief, does not change this fundamental. If anything, AI makes it more urgent. MIT researchers have recently published a paper, and they've tracked how business models are evolving with AI. They have described four models that emerge in the AI era. The first is existing plus. It is simply augmenting what you already do for customers with AI tools. The second is customer proxy. It is where a firm acts autonomously on behalf of the customer. The third is modular curator, which means you assemble third-party services and you tailor bundles for customers. And the fourth is in the agentic AI space, and it's where you coordinate entire ecosystems on behalf of customers, triggering decisions, adjusting in real time, and essentially coming back to them with an answer. But I do want you to notice something here in all these four models. Notice that what they have in common at the center of every single one of these is the customer, their goals, their constraints, their reality. In the orchestrator model, which is the most advanced of the four, humans actually are the ones that define the goals and the guardrails. AI agents execute within those boundaries, which means the quality of the outcome depends entirely on the quality of the human understanding that sets that direction. If you understand your customer's problem clearly, agentic AI will execute that understanding at extraordinary scale and speed. If your understanding of your customer's problem is shallow, then actually agentic AI will scale that shallowness just as efficiently. It will build you a very capable, a very expensive, monumental solution, but with the wrong understanding of the problem that the customer is trying to solve. The businesses that will lead are not the ones that automate the fastest. They actually are the ones that understand the deepest. So you're not here tonight because you're new to technology. You're here because you've been building in it. You already carry the outside eye in that perspective. You already know what it feels like when a system overlooks you or mispredicts you or was never even designed with you in mind because of the industry you're already in as a woman in IT. The question is whether you bring that knowledge into the rooms where AI is being designed, governed, and deployed. Because if you don't, someone else will fill that space from the inside without the questions only you know to ask. If we look at Funke Opeke's story, she looked at connectivity, the connectivity gap that everyone had accepted as permanent, and she laid 7,000 kilometers of cable under the ocean. Ori Okolo looked at an information crisis with no existing platform and no existing address, but she built a tool that the world didn't know it needed as far as Sudan, Fukushima, and 160 other countries in days. They did not succeed despite their position. They succeeded because of what their position allowed them to see. That capacity lives in this call and in this virtual room tonight. The AI era does not need us to prove that we belong in technology. It needs us to do what we have always done when we understand a system more clearly than anyone who built it. We need to name the gap, build the infrastructure, shape the standards that follow, and lead. Lead so confidently that we see Africa lead its own AI revolution. Thank you, ladies. Thank you so much.